Shall we start? So, uh, good morning, everybody. Basically, I am going to speak about plants which completely cover water, water bodies, making it difficult to survive for a large number of species. So, basically, that includes both animals and plants. So, we will have a broad view on what these uh, species are doing. We technically call it as an invasive alien species. Invasive basically because it invades large number of ecosystems. Alien because it has come from a totally different location. We normally take the political boundary as a criteria, but basically it has come from a totally different country. So any any species which has come from a totally different country and creating a problem over here, we call it as a invasive alien species. So this is the definition. To term as a invasive alien species, it has to cause at least one among the three problems. One, it has to cause a impact on the biodiversity. Second, it has to cause a impact on the human health over there. And thirdly, it has to cause a impact on the ecosystem services. Now, an invasion starts basically because of different stages. The first stage of an invasion happening is the introduction. You can think of any of the aquatic invasions like the Salvinia mollustia, the uh, Iconia. So all these things had gone through all these specific stages of invasion. It had a specific case of introduction and a stage of colonization, a stage of establishment, then a stage of disbursement from that particular area. Then it has to form differently stable satellite populations from where it can proceed further. And at the end of it, it has to cause an invasive spread. As if you take Iconia as a case, Iconia was a species which was restricted to Southern America, and there was a big exhibition which was organized in North America, where different organizations came over to present their species, and Iconia was brought from South America for exhibiting this particular exhibition in North America. Iconia produces very beautiful flowers. So people bought it from there and took it to different places in America. And basically because of its beauty, it was taken to many other countries across the globe. And it became a serious invasive species. And if you look at many of the species which has been invasive, you will find that most of them are extremely beautiful. You would love to take them home. So beauty is one factor which the species use to spread. Now, it is not just without our knowledge, there are invasive species come over with our own intentions. We have brought invasive species as cover crops, as ornamental plants, as camouflage during war. One of the important invasive species like the Mycenia micrantha, we call it as a myelin weed. It was brought to India to cover the war fields during the Second World War, and it became a big invasive. War fields. inadvertent introductions include ship ballast water. The ships which takes cargo across the countries basically have to fill their cargo with water. They unload materials, and if they want to move again, they have to fill the space with water. So they pump in water, the marine water, and when there is a new loc- location, they pump it out. So this is an interesting pathway where invest, invest, invasive species are spread. Uh, and it also spread along with a large number of commodities. We had a very interesting look at the cargo, the containers at Cochin shipyard, and we found that there's a large number of species which are already resident over there, including rats, mouse. They're permanent residents in the ships which are moving across the different continents. And now there's a large number of factors which help in invasion happening. The first one is the disturbance. You have a ecosystem which is disturbed, and basically that helps invasion to happen, and increase trade and transport. And if a particular area is already invaded, that gives a better option for other invasive species to survive over there. And now climate change, when the temperature increases, it gives a additional advantage for the invasive species to establish rather than the native species. Uh, Next is the absence of natural enemies. When a species come to our land from a totally different location, like for example from South America, uh, it will never find any natural enemy right over here. So their population explodes. So it can become an invasive species. And normally invasive species travel along latitudes. Latitudes are the lines which connect places on the earth with the same climate. Okay. Equator is a is a equator is what? Yeah, equator is one line. Yeah. So it connects all locations with 0 degree latitude, and if you change the latitude, maybe 5 degree, 10 degree, 10, 11 degree, north or south, you connect places across the globe with the same climate. So normally invasive species travel along latitudes. Basically, because of that reason, most of the invasive species we have in Kerala has come from Latin America. And every invasive species will be coming up with new weapons. Normally, see, there's a very interesting case in Kerala. We had a invasive species called lantana camera, uh, and many years later, when we were speaking about lantana camera, people used to say, lantana camera is gone. The problem is solved. But for us researchers, the problem is that we understand that lantana camera has gone down, but the area which lantana camera has occupied has been reoccupied by yet another invasive species called Mimosa diplotica. So whenever an invasion happens, the invasive species is being challenged by other invasive species, and they occupy that particular area. It is not the native species which come back. Yeah, but we have in Kerala we had waves of invasion. started from Lantana, then Mimosa, then Mycania. So we have a wave invasion which has happened in Kerala. Okay, yeah. Most of the investments are quite beautiful. People love to have it in their garden. Fine. Uh, so whenever invasion happens, it can cause the displacement of native species. Secondly, it can degrade the native habitats. It can spread disease. It can disrupt human social and economic activities that depend on water resources. If you go to Alapi in Kerala, you can see how the invasive species have completely disrupted the houseboat industry, which is happening over there. Now, if you look at the literature, you can identify 15 microorganisms which have been spread in freshwater or in brackish water, and 8 inland aquatic plants, 14 fishes which are invasive, then 19 marine invasive species. So we have a total of 56 invasive species in our aquatic habitats in Kerala. Now, there are different pathways of introduction. The first is the accidental introduction. We doesn't know. Like, for example, the giant African snail, which has created a big problem in Kerala. We never brought it, but then it came along with the timber which was imported from Myanmar. Uh, Myanmar or Burma is our neighbor, um, which was under military rule until recently. Now the problem was that in the forest sector, when we had decided that we never used to cut natural forest, that was a decision which was taken by large number of countries across the globe. We decided not to cut natural forests for timber purposes. But Myanmar was not a signatory, and they continued to cut natural forests. So if in inter-roads you find a lorry plying with just one single big log in that vehicle, you can be very sure that it is coming from Myanmar, because that was the only country which was felling natural big trees quite recently. So they were felling it, and they were spreading it across the globe. Along with that, the giant African snail, which originated from Kenya and Tanzania, and which has spread to many different countries across the globe, started to spread along with the timbers. And it was almost at the same time that we announced our globalization policy. The neoliberal policies made the movement of goods and materials much more easier. So earlier, the rule was that every material which is coming to India has to be fumigated, made sure that the pests are not there. But now what happened was that it has been privatized. It is the private people who are destined to do that. But they do it on paper. They never do it on ground. So we have multiple waves of invasion happening to Kerala. And we normally speak of the triple T's: the trade, travel, and tourism, which makes the species move across. So here you have the list of invasive fishes which we have in Kerala. Now the situation is such that if you go to a water body in Kerala, if you cast a net, the net will be filled with uh, the clarias. Large number of fish will be coming up. The native fishes have completely been displaced, and sadly, the people in Kerala doesn't have a liking of eating clarias. So we are having a situation where our ecosystems are becoming just one species dominated ecosystems. Yeah, through fishes. And interestingly, what happened is that there are several temples in Kerala where they had the habit of feeding native fishes. Those native fishes have been completely replaced with the introduced species. So when we went to the temple guys, I told them, see, this is not the species which you used to feed. They're not bothered. They just want to feed the fish and take the culture forward. They don't bother about which species that is. Now this has become a big problem. Pardon? Yeah, edible, but not so popular in Kerala. It has got a very interesting history. Like there's a very interesting fish called the Nile perch. Nile perch is a big fish which is found in the lower part of Africa. It was introduced to the Lake Victoria in Egypt. Now, when it was introduced, the idea was that it would boost the fisheries industry. Now, Nile perch becomes so big, and the Lake Victoria didn't have any big fish, just like the Nile perch. So what happened was that they had the big fish growing in the Lake Victoria. Now, the fishing gears were not enough to catch the big fish, so they had to change the gears. And when the big fish was captured, they had to have a different method of preserving it. They could not just set it off. They could not dry the fish in the sun because it is so big. So they wanted to have different methods. They had to have large amount of firewood for smoking the Nile perch which they collected. And for forest, they had to cut the forest trees. They cut the forest, they burned the fish, they started selling them. And it started off a totally different cycle where the entire ecology of the Lake Victoria collapsed because of the invasion happening. Near to here, we have the Weymouth Lake, where 7 excellent species are reported. We have several case studies in India where invasive species have been recorded, but still our government has got a active program of linking the rivers of India. Now, once you connect the rivers, what's going to happen is that the invasive species reaches everywhere. It happened in Kerala in 2018. In 2018, we have the massive floods. We had 10 plus invasive species before the floods. After floods, we have 18 species. We have a large number of pet species which are grown in aquariums, which are spread to the natural systems. Now, aquatic systems are not just invaded by animals but also invaded by plants. And we have a large number of plants which have been invading our natural systems. Econia is very popular. Now, this is a very interesting case of Kamumba furcator, an invasive species which was brought to Kerala to be grown in aquariums. But then people just threw it out. During the COVID lockdown in Connecticut, what happened was that the entire river, small stream, uh, became pink. The media called it the pink bloom. And just because of this particular invasive plant which has been brought in. And even though it was during the COVID lockdown, it was just preceding the local self-body elections. There was a very interesting industry which started right then and there over there. People used to sell small 10 or 12 twigs of kavumba was put it tied together and sold it. So there's a sale happening. So basically what's happening is that the invasive space being spread. They are so beautiful. They made the entire space absolutely colorful. Now, this is another interesting species which bring me and my students over here today. So yesterday night and today we are going to collect the turtles. This is Trachymys scripta elegans, commonly called as a red-eared slider turtle, which is a pet species. And after the international release of films like Ninja Turtle, it has become so popular. So small kids buy it, and when they buy it, it is small. You can put it in a matchbox, just such a small size. But then the problem is that when they grow big, they throw it outside. So we have a program in which we have told the people not to throw them outside. And if at all you need to throw them outside, just call us. Now we have nearly 220 turtles in our laboratory. So we are airing it up. So one way of dealing with invasions, we never ever want to, because it's an omnivorous species. It feeds on plants, it feeds on animals, it feeds on anything. So we never ever want the species to proliferate in the wild.
So, but how does it cause salmonella infection? That's the last point on that slide.
Yeah, because whenever a species move, it is not just alone. It moves along with all the pathogens which are harbored in the body. Like for we also, if I go to a totally different country, it is not just my body which is moving. It is all the microorganisms which is in my gut. They are all moving. Similarly, for the turtle also, they move along with all the microorganisms, and one of them is salmonella, which can cause disease to human beings. We have specific cases of salmonella infections in children in Kerala. So we are trying to correlate whether it's because of the turtle.
It's still legal to have them as pets, right?
Yes, the legal system is much more far away from the scientific system in Kerala, and also in India. Even if the scientists identify a particular thing, it take eons to get it into rule or law. So it takes a long time. We are trying to make it fast. So, what the invasive species do is to firstly to disrupt the native habitats. Secondly, it reduces the biodiversity. It clears the diversity and occupies just one species will be occupied, and it will cause extinctions of native plants and animals, and it will compete with the native organisms for limited resources, and it will alter the habitat. So these are the impacts which can cause. We now have a nodal center for biological invasions located at KFRA. We are doing four things. One is to restore invasive species invaded habitats, including both plants and animals. Secondly, we do the early detection and control of invasions which are happening. Thirdly, we develop policy directives. And finally, we create awareness, creation among decision makers and general public. The problem which we are facing is that you go to the Chief Secretary of Kerala and speak about biological invasions. It's totally new for him. He has never ever heard about it. So we are trying to put the material in the textbooks, school textbooks, so that the next generation bureaucrats will have already learned about it at the school level. So NCBI is one single point. And the reason why we started NCBI was very interesting. There's a place called Koni in Pathanamthitta district, the same district where we are now. They had a big problem of giant African snail invasion. So when the invasion happened, they went to the health department, and the health department told them, no, this is not causing any problem. It's not our issue. They went to the agriculture department, and the agriculture department guys told that it's not an agriculture pest, so it's not our case. They went to the forest department, and the forest department guys told that it does not come from the forest department. It does not come from the forest. It's not our issue. So in a democracy, we need systems which can cater to problems. So actually, it was that particular scenario which catered to the start of the Nodal Center for Biological Invasions. Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, how do we restore the see if there is a fish species which is invading, so how do we restore?
We can never restore.
Okay.
What we can do is to prevent the proliferation of the invasive species. And it's left to nature whether the native species can come back or not.
So that means we have to introduce.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sir, do you think there is any relationship between the quality of water and invasive species? For example, the plant species which we discuss, they mainly found in polluted water. They spread very fast.
Yeah, it's not a one-way relationship. It's a two-way relationship. Invasive species can thrive on polluted waters, and the presence of invasive species can make the water polluted also. So it's a two-way interaction.
So can making water healthy can reduce the population of
Sure, but then they can survive on pure water also. They can survive on multiple layers of quality of water. So what you need to do is to have stringent monitoring. And the easiest way to control an invasive species is when it just starts to invade, can physically remove it. So keep monitoring the water body. Have a lookout for invasive species, and whenever you see the first plan coming up, just remove it. If you can do it for a few weeks, can make sure that the invasion doesn't happen.
Thank you.
Thank you for this session, sir. I just wanted to know, as far as interlinking of rivers are concerned, what will it mean for them? So how dangerous will it be, or what will be the impact if rivers are interlinked as far as river health and ecology of a healthy river is concerned?
Yeah. We have these invasions spread across different rivers, and we have clear data about it. And we are really, as scientists who are working on aquatic systems, we are really afraid about the scenario of linking rivers. It's going to create real havoc. So now it's not just about linking rivers. Now, see the topography of any location, the mountains, the hills, the rivers, the valleys. It has been formed based on a rationale which has been evolutionarily decided. When you change it, you never know what's going to happen again. So every good country in the planet, when I say good country, I mean the Scandinavian countries, many of the European countries, what they do is to respect the topography, even if it doesn't understand the logic behind it. You respect the topography of the country. Don't damage it. So there's a simple premise they normally operate. We doesn't have that. Now with the advent of machines like the JCB, you can transform an ecosystem very fast. Now that's creating big problems. It's not just that the invaded species, but also this we are providing facilities for new species to invade. I forgot to include that particular thing in this PowerPoint. We normally call it as the political ecology of invasive species. Invasive species come in not just because of their interest, but because of the facility which we provide to them. Yesterday, when I was moving out, one among you came and asked me about how to manage Prosopis juliflora. This is a major invasive species in Tamil Nadu, not just in Tamil Nadu, in many of the northern states. You know how Prosopis came to India? Yeah. Prosopis was, the seeds of Prosopis was brought in by the state, and it was spread across the whole country from helicopters to make many of the space green. So why did the state do that? Yeah, it wanted greenery to be there, and also the wood can be used as firewood. So that was a specific purpose. So the state didn't understand that this was a invasive species, but it created big havoc. And now we are looking over to how to deal with the invasive species. Similarly, there are many other species like the Acacia auriculiformis in Kerala, Acacia majum in Kerala, Eucalyptus terticornis in Kerala. These species were brought from Australia to increase our fuel need and also the pulp need in Kerala. So invasive species come invited and also by themselves. So we have both the type of species coming over here.
Sir, is there any data available on the reduction of the native species of fishes or the animals available? That is point out. As you said that there is not possible to
Yeah, it's an interesting question. That is there. There are many people who are working. I think Dr. Bijuma was here yesterday. The problem was that you gave the wrong topic to Dr. Bijuma. Dr. Bijuma is an expert on aquatic invasive species, and he would have told you the tale in a much better way. Now, see, that is available. We know what was the situation of diversity of species before the invasion, and after the invasion, we have the data. Now, but your question is very interesting. Whenever we move around advocating that invasive species have to be managed, one of the interesting questions which come from people, especially students, is that, sir, how can you say that a species is unwelcome? Doesn't it have got the right to live anywhere on this planet? So this is a very interesting question which normally comes in. I had done a campaign across the campuses in Kerala. So one of the interesting questions was this. So what I normally do was to expose them to some of the serious invasions, and they get baptized into champions of invasion biology. So even at the international level, we normally feel that except for pet industry, we can take on any other thing based on scientific data. We have the data with us. But if you say that I love this particular species, we don't have anything to say. It's up to you to nurture it. So that's the way it happens.
Sir, is invasive species have positive impacts on environment or not only negative?
Yeah, we define an invasive species only when it causes a negative impact on the environment.
Positive impacts is there?
Pardon?
Positive impacts is there, not?
Yeah, there are positive impacts. But when you make that matrix with the positives and the negatives come much higher than the positives.
So, is there where they are native, are they positive?
Yeah, that's quite positive. And the difference between the native location and the invader location is that in the native location, they have natural enemies. So their population is being controlled. So when they come to a new location, they don't have any organism which control their number. So that's a problem. So many of the species which I showed you, like lantana, like giant African snail, the turtle, every species, they are not at all invasive in their native location.
So does that mean we should bring their natural enemies to our location?
Yeah. Fine. Yeah. So that's a way in which that is what we call as the biological control. We go back to the land of origin. We bring the natural enemies over here. So that's a way to manage it. Yes. That has been done across many different islands and continents. And at some places, it has gone completely off track because the species just brought in. After feeding on the invasive species, they started feeding on the native species also. So it's a very careful decision to be taken.
Recently, I had been to World Natural Heritage Site inscribed by UNESCO, that is Karst Plateau, which has endemic flowering plants. And what it is observed that the invasive species, it has not reached till plateau, but they are at the borders. And what people are saying that if we put on fire, the farm fires, that will lower the invasive species. But a researcher over there, she said that putting fire, it may increase the population. So in this case, what can be done? How? I mean, certain actions of removing the invasive species may revert back, and they may increase the population. So in this case, what can be done?
Yes. That's a very interesting case where the local community has got a solution, and the forest officials have got a totally different solution, which is conflicting with the thing. it happens here also. So what we need to do is that, as far as I know, every species has got its own population dynamics, and we need to deal with individual species separately. So one particular thing which works for one species doesn't work for the other species. So we need to deal with it individually for every species. If I give you an example, we have a big problem of a tree invasion happening in Kerala called Snail spectabilis. It has occupied large expanse of wildlife sanctuaries in Wayanad. What we are doing over there is that the first effort from our side is to prevent the spread. We just chop the flowering of the species. So we make sure that it doesn't spread further. So and then we devise the next method. So it's a very interesting war game. So every species has got a different methodology to be adopted.
Sir, when you were talking about the catfish, I was reminded of the get rid of them. Like the catfish here, the local people didn't eat that fish, but there were many initiatives to try and introduce it in the restaurants and have cook-offs so people can, attempt different ways at cooking it, and even include it in local jewelry. So I think there are ways that the local people can manage. If they really want them, because the catfish is quite liked in other places. Here in Kerala, if they don't like it, perhaps maybe there can be initiatives to sort of introduce new cooking methods or cooking contests so people get familiar with it and start appreciating the taste of it, something like that.
Yes.
Also, I think, can I say, there's a belief that catfish feeds on really polluted. I mean, it's a dirty fish because it eats a lot of nasty things, and I think that's why people don't want to include it in their diet. But it's actually quite tasty.
Yeah, it's quite tasty. So it's basically a psychological thing. And being an entomologist, I study insects, and we entomologists are now trying to promote insects as a food item. Now, in Northeast, they normally feed insects, especially species like grasshoppers, locusts. They come in plenty. They fry it and they feed on it. Now, there's a big protein source. Now the problem is that many people doesn't feel like chewing a grasshopper. There's a psychological taboo associated with it. So what we are trying to do is to make it into biscuits. So this is a grasshopper, but it comes in the form of biscuit. You don't have a psychological problem of having a biscuit. So we are doing that. So similarly, we can also do with the invasive species.
There was this in Brazil where these mosquito problem were there. So genetically, they have changed the thing. Is it possible to do it in an invasive fish where they can genetically change or the reproduction system or?
Yes, possible.
Yeah.
Now, many of the places where the high level of proliferation is happening is that what they do is to make one sex infertile.
Okay. Yeah.
So after they mate, they don't produce offsprings. Mating happens, but the offspring will not be there. Yes.
Is it happening in India?
No. We have not a example of that sort of genetically manipulating the species, but there's a prospect in doing that.
Okay.
Are there any other external factors that can work
Against them. Yeah.
Like, this Darwinian theory of survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
So can we think about, can we imagine any other external factors that could work against this invasive species?
Yeah, there are. I need to tell you about what we call as the 10% rule. There's something which we call as the 10% rule. The 10% rule says that of all the organisms located in one particular area, 10% only move out. And of the 10% which is moving out, only 10% reaches the destination. And of the species which are reaching the destination, only 10% survives. And of the 10% which is surviving, only 10% becomes an invasive species. So there's a large number of checks which is happening before a species is going to be invasive. Invasive species happens because it is able to adapt to the local situation, and it can make use of the situation where and increase its population size. We have never ever known an invasive species which has gone down because of local factors. Basically because of the fact that an invasive species, we call it an invasive species only when it is able to adapt to the local situation and able to survive. So as of now, I don't have any data which can help your argument. Ade.
Sir, is there a climate change or impact on increasing and decreasing population of invasive species?
Yeah, climate change is a very interesting factor which promotes invasion. So let me ask you a question. Does everybody in this particular room agrees that climate change is happening? Yes. You all agree? Yes. Okay, fine. Thanks. Because there's another school of thought which
you are right, because we are doing a hydropower project and we met the top people in Delhi. They said we are still debating.
Okay.
So they don't even factor in climate factor when even designing hydropower projects. So
yes.
I mean, your doubt is.
Okay. So if you agree with that, see, climate change brings up totally novel systems. I'll tell you one simple example in Kerala. There's a place in Kerala called as Madhikattan Mala. Madhikattan Mala, that's the name of the particular area. It came into news when that particular area was encroached by people. It is a forest area, shallow forest area. It was encroached by people, and they started to grow cardamom over there. It became a big hue and cry, and it was a big encouragement issue. Every day the newspapers had their titles on that. Long back happened. It was only later that we understood that that particular episode of people encroaching that area was the first signature of climate change in Kerala. Because that name was very interesting, Madhikattan Mala. There is a story behind the story also. What happened was that people used to go over there and they tried to grow cardamom over there. It didn't come up, basically because the entire area was covered with fog for 6 months every year. മലയാളത്തിലെ കോടമഞ്ഞ് എന്ന് പറയും. കോടമഞ്ഞ് വീണ് കിടക്കുന്ന സ്ഥലങ്ങൾ. So that and it invited a large number of fungal diseases for cardamom. So it was very difficult to grow cardamom over there. So they retreated. They went again the next year. അങ്ങനെ കുറേ പ്രാവശ്യം ഏലകൃഷി ചെയ്യാൻ പോയിട്ട് മതികെട്ട് ഇറങ്ങി പോകുന്ന മലക്കാണ് അവർ മതികെട്ടാൻ മല എന്ന് പേരിട്ട്. മതികെട്ട് ഇറങ്ങി പോകുന്ന സ്ഥലമാണ്. But the reason why it became a major news was that they could grow cardamom over there, which means that the climate has changed. There's no 6 months of fog happening over there. Now, that was the first signature of climate change impact on Kerala, but for us it was just a revenue issue. It was just the issue of land encroachment. If you move further up from Madhikattan, you reach a place called Munnar. When I was a school kid, when I went to Munnar, the place where I stayed didn't even have a electric fan. There's no need of a fan. But later on, entire hotels in Munnar had electric fans, and now if you go over there, they have got air conditioners. But still, there are people who say that climate change is not happening. So changes are happening. Climate change is a reality. And there are three major impacts which we need to be careful about. The first thing is that both the North Pole and the South Pole is getting heated up. The big ice caps are being melted, and the water is being added over to the seawater, and the sea level is rising. Many of the islands in the Pacific have already submerged. Our neighbors like Maldives, they have already started buying land in Sri Lanka, New Zealand, and Australia. They're about to shift. It's so sad a situation. I've been in Maldives talking to small kids, school kids. They dream of a place where they are going to live, which they have never seen. They know that they are going to move out. They know that their land is going to be submerged. The maximum height of any Maldivian island is just 4 meters. So you have a wave which is more than 4 meters in height, so can completely wash away the island. So many places are going to submerge. In India also we have that issue. So Sundarbans. You know about Sundarbans, right? Sundarbans, the WWF is moving people away from Sundarbans for many number of years now, because the sea level is rising. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the species have started moving to colder locations. We have an institute called Central Marine Fishes Research Institute at Cochin. Their data shows that many of the fishes which we normally used to collect from the Kerala coast is now collected from the Vishakhapatnam coast. The schools of fish are moving. They are moving towards a colder climate. And what is happening on the land? On land, what is happening is that fish are moving towards higher locations. You move to higher locations, it's much more cooler. You go to Ooty, you go to Kodaikanal during summer basically because it's cooler out there. The species are moving. Now what's important is that you know the concept of ecosystem, right? You have learned it in your school. And the best example your teachers would have told you is about a pond. A pond is an ecosystem. And your teacher would have given you the list of species living over there in integrity. Now take the pond for example. Now when the temperature starts to rise up, every species moves out. But every species moves out in its own space. Those who can run, they run. Those who can walk, they walk. Those who can crawl, they crawl. Those who can hop, they hop. Those who can fly, they fly. Now, every species moves at their own pace, which actually means that the integrity of the ecosystem is completely lost. Now, our place, Kerala, is facing an immense tragedy of losing ecosystem integrity. Now, these species are moving upwards. They are moving upwards because going up, the climate is much more comfortable. It's not just animals, plants also move. Can plants move? Yeah, plants move when they are seeds. Think of a tree standing over here, producing a large number of seeds and dispersing the seeds all across the 360 degrees across it. And think of a situation where only the seeds which gone up germinate. In 100 years, 200 years, you will find that the tree has shifted from its current location to a newer location. So plants also move. Now the question is, what is going to happen if the species starts to climb up the mountains? What is going to happen to the species which are already at the top of the mountains? Pardon? Yeah. So what will happen to them?
They will also move up. It's happening with apples and all that. You can't grow them now in the earlier areas. They
Mm.
grow higher.
Fine. I'm speaking about the top species. There's no space beyond that. Where do they go? Yeah, they go into a process called as local extinction. They just sign off. Now, we call those locations as sky islands. Every mountain peak is a sky island because there are species which are living over there which cannot just go to another island. Birds can fly, butterflies can fly, but many other species cannot move that fast. They have to climb down the valley and to climb up the next. That normally doesn't happen. So we normally say as every peak as a sky island. So every sky island is on the Western Ghats is facing extinction, local extinction. So that's happening. So this is second impact of climate change. The first is the sea level rise. Second is the species extinction. But then we are more concerned about the third impact, which is the extreme climatic events which are happening. In Kerala was a safe place to live. We don't have any volcanoes over here. We don't have any major earthquakes happening. We don't have any cyclones coming over here. So Kerala was basically a comfortable space to live. But we had the Oki cyclone coming over here. It took a large number of lives. Then also we had many other cyclones, unprecedented in the history of Kerala. We had a cyclone called Gaja. Gaja was really surprising for us scientists because it originated in the Bay of Bengal. It had this landfall in Tamil Nadu, but it crossed the Western Ghats. We never know about any other cyclone which has crossed the Western Ghats. It has crossed the Western Ghats and moved towards the Arabian Sea. So the climate is changing. Extreme climatic events are going to happen. And we have lost the predictability also. Our monsoon, both the monsoons, the southwest and the northeast monsoons, we have lost control on predicting them. So we are moving towards an unprecedented space where we don't have anything definite to be told about what's going to happen. Any more questions?
Thank you, sir, for the excellent session. And of course, we can continue the discussion further. We will take a short break, a tea break, and we'll reassemble at 12 o'clock for the next session. Thank you. And on behalf of the participants and